Can we make the best starter deck even better? Let's talk about it. What's up, captains? Welcome back to the other decks. My name is Casual Dobo, and today we're going to be talking about my upgraded version of the Green Kid starter deck. Now, I have been on record saying that the Green starter deck, in my opinion, is the best starter deck to come out of the four that launched with the One Piece TCG. However, that doesn't mean that it won every single event, and that's because there are some weaknesses of it. So, can we actually change some of the ratios to make sure we're covering those weaknesses and make this starter deck even better? I think so. So here's my take on what that starter deck can look like. But before we get started, I do want to mention we have launched our new memberships program on the channel. If you're interested, there's a little join button underneath this video that has a lot of great info on it. So this is a monthly paid membership, very much like a Twitch sub, but unlike that, we're only offering it for $2.99, aka $3, as opposed to the $5 it costs for a Twitch sub. And if you join the membership, you do get some cool perks like a loyalty badge, like this straw Greymon that we have here, access to the emotes, as well as shout outs in videos. Speaking of which, I'd love to give a huge shout out to Haley, Jack, Solomon, and David, who were the first members to become commanders on the other crew. Thank you so much for joining the membership, really appreciate it, and hope you're enjoying the emotes. I do have a couple of other things planned for the members, such as members only content, members only streams, shout outs, and then also we're going to do some cool Discord things, but that is all ramping up still, so more details on that soon. But if you're unable to join the membership, no worries. All of the content that I've been making for you for free is still going to be made for free and available on this channel. And some non-monetary ways you can help support this channel is by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. All of those things play a huge factor in this pretty awesome community that we're building, and I'm excited about the future for the other decks. I'm just as excited as I am about the future of the green starter deck. So as I'm going through this, if you have any sort of suggestions or ratios that you change, let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. But with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump right into the deck profile. Alright, and here we are at the deck profile. So let's start off with our leader. So this is our leader, 5,000 power, 5 life, classic monocolor leader. And his ability is activate main once per turn, 3. So you gotta tap 3 of your Dawn in the cost area. And then also discard a card from your hand, switch this leader to active. As you've seen in some of my gameplay matches, or you have even heard of in the last Kid Starter deck profile that I did, this can get to some crazy numbers real quick. Potentially swing for on average 10k per hit. It's pretty solid. It's a very strong leader. Next up, we do have 4 copies of Capone Gang Beige, and this is just our 1 cost blocker. I think blockers are super important for the early meta of the One Piece TCG, and so having as many of them as possible is pretty good, especially if it only costs 1, so that's why we have 4 copies of him. Next up, best searcher in the game, 4 copies of Jewelry Bonnie. 1 cost to play, 1,000 power, does have a counter at plus 1k, and then activate main 1, so rest 1 of your Dawn. Look at the top 5 cards of your deck, and then reveal up to 1 Supernovas type card and add it to your hand. Then place the remaining cards at the bottom of the deck in any order. So a real quick note, the card on screen is a proxy version, based on translations from the Japanese cards. So this does not have the errata that says, up to on a lot of the effects. So if it looks funky, that's probably why, but the effect is reveal up to 1 Supernovas type card. But this is a powerful searcher just because this deck is just full of Supernovas, and especially some of our top end cards, they're all Supernovas, so this helps us find the pieces that we need a little bit faster. Next up, we have 3 copies of Urogue. So 2 costs to play, 3,000 power, counter potential, plus 1k, but Dawn times 1 if you have 3 or more characters. This card gains plus 2,000 power. Note that it does not say for the turn, so that power increase does carry over to your opponent's turn. So on paper, according to your opponent, this is a 5k character. Honestly, a very underutilized and cheap attacker when you can get it off. And if you're able to combo it with, your law card, the super rare, this can hit for some pretty decent amount of damage for relatively low cost. Next up, we do have 4 copies of Scratchman of Pooh, 2 costs to play, 3,000 power, Dawn times 1 when attacking, rest 1 of your opponent's Dawn cards. However, The reason why we have it at 4 copies is for its counter potential, because this is our 2k counter, so an instant 4 of off the bat. Next up, we do have 4 copies of Killer, so 3 cost to play, 3000 power, counter plus 1000, but has an on-play ability. KO up to one of your opponent's rested characters with a cost of 3 or less. And then also trigger, play this card. So this is really cool, against like red cards, red decks, right? Because they'll often be swinging with some fairly low-costed attackers who are hitting for big things. If this comes out of life, you can instantly KO that thing. Yes, the damage still goes through. That's how you got the trigger ability, but you get to remove a body on the board, which is pretty useful. And so yeah, to increase the chances of us, seeing it in life or getting it in hand, we put a 4 of in it. Next up, and this is where actually this deck profile is going to differ from the optimized deck profile I did, talking about the Japanese meta. Since this is for the deck limited battles, promos are legal. So I have 3 copies of the promo Eustace Captain Kid. So this is the one that you would have gotten from the promo packs from various events, like New York Comic Con, the demo decks, etc. But Promo Kid is 3 cost to play, 4000 power, does have a counter, which is nice, plus 1k, but Dawn times 2, this character gains double attack, which means for the 1 attack it does, if it's successful, it deals 2 damage instead of 1. Now imagine this in combination with Law, who unsuspends a supernova. It's pretty good. If your opponent has no way of preventing the attacks or dealing with the damage, you could potentially be looking at 4 damage on a single turn just by swinging with Kid. Now I will say, when Kid is on the board, it's almost an instant like get rid of it, KO, or put out some blockers so that it can't actually deal that successful attack. But honestly, that's not really a bad thing, because if your opponent is wasting their removal on a 3 cost character, no matter how good it is, that's a win, especially if you have your other high costed characters available in hand to kind of play out. It's almost like a decoy, because yeah, no one's going to let that double attack through, as long as they can help it. Next up, I do have 4 copies of Veto. So this is our vanilla, 3 cost to play, 5000 power, counter plus 1000. So we have it for counter potential, and it is a natural attacker at 3 costs, so it's just pretty cheap, pretty efficient when it comes to providing a little bit of pressure against our opponent. Next up, we got 4 copies of X-Drake. So 4 cost to play, 5000 power, counter plus 1k, but Dawn times 1, so you do need to attach 1 Dawn onto it during your turn while this character is rested, plus 1000 power for all Marines and Supernovas and Leader. By the way, if you're attacking with it, because it is rested, it also gets that plus 1000. So most likely you're swinging, 7k with this X-Drake, and you're buffing the rest of your party. Not to bring a D&D term in here. Next up, we have 4 copies of Kobe. So 4 cost to play, 6000 power, counter plus 1000, vanilla. Now you're probably wondering, why did I keep the Marines in a Supernovas deck? Well, it's because it has 6k power. And particularly in the starter deck meta, 6k power is a very good number, it's very strong. And we'll see that once we go over some of the other, customized, optimized, upgraded deck profiles. Because if you look at blue, who's the 6k attacker in there? Pacifista. And blue's going to be scary in the deck limited battles just because you can cheat out that 6k. And it's very difficult to get rid of. You need to waste, some resources, attach some Dawn onto a character, find some removal, get rid of it. So 6k characters are going to be a problem for you if you let them stay on the board. But that's why we have 4 copies of it, because we want it to be a problem for our opponent. Next up, we have 4 copies of Trafalgar Law. So this is the super rare from the deck, 5 cost to play, 6000 power, so pretty good stats, and also counter plus 1000, which is wild. I remember initially thinking like, oh, how am I going to balance the Trafalgar Law with the rest of it? And then I realized, wait, it has counter potential? Zoro doesn't have counter potential. I don't think Dofi or Crocodile have counter potential in blue, and I know King doesn't have counter potential. So this is one of the only SRs from the starter decks that has a plus 1k counter, and that's kind of wild, because it's also a very good card. On play, set one of your Supernovas or Heart Pirates type rested characters with a cost of 5 or less as active. So what are some viable targets that you can do with this? Well, we talked about a little bit, but Urog is a surprisingly good attacker and target for this ability. You want to swing that 7k twice. X-Drake is your person. We already talked about the potential of Promo Kid. Would you like to do 4 damage this turn? But more importantly, with that ability, you can target Basil Hawkins, which we have 3 copies of in this deck. So Basil Hawkins is probably one of our primary attackers that we're searching for. 5 cost to play, 6,000 power. Doesn't have any counter potential, but he doesn't need it because he has an awesome ability. Dawn ×1, once per turn, your turn. If this character battles your opponent's character, set this card as active. So if your opponent has suspended characters or rested characters, Digimon term, you can use Basil Hawkins, attach 1 Dawn onto it, and then swing into the rested character, and it'll unsuspend. You can then attack again into your opponent's leader, possibly take off a life, and then play Trafalgar Law, unsuspend Hawkins, and do it again. Now on that third swing, if you attack a character, it's not gonna unsuspend because the ability is once per turn. But still, getting 3 7k attacks is pretty worth it for this combo. And then rounding out our characters, we do have 3 copies of the 7 cost Uses Captain Kid. So 7 cost to play, 7,000 power, is a blocker, which is very nice, but even more impressive, Dawn ×1, end of your turn, switch this character to active. So when it is viable to attack, you attach 1 Dawn onto it. It is now 8k, which is pretty strong. You swing into your opponent, and then at the end of your turn, you unrest it, and it's able to block you on your opponent's turn at 7k power. But yeah, if you suddenly find yourself with Blocker Kid out on the field for more than 2 turns, you have a good shot at winning. It honestly can really stall out a game to the point where you can just aggro with your own leader's ability and just keep this up as a blocker and still be in a pretty good position. Now moving on to our event cards, do have 2 copies of Scalpel, so this is our 1 cost event, counter event. Your leader or one of your characters gains plus 2,000 power for the duration of the battle. Then switch up to 1 of your Dawn to active. And in trigger ability, switch up to 2 of your Dawn to active. So honestly, it is a pretty decent, cheap counter. Plus 2k is nothing to sneeze at, and it's pretty solid. Now I did have to reduce the events just to make some room for those characters. So you can see that here, 2 copies of Repel. So this is once again a counter event for 2 costs, but your leader or one of your characters gains plus 4,000 power during this turn, then set 1 of your rested Dawn as active. Like, full disclosure, I'm not a huge fan of this counter. I think in OP01 there's a much better counter that can sub this, and that's why I reduced it from I think 4 down to 2. And then to finish out the deck, we do have 2 copies of Straw Sword. Main ability, rest 1 of your opponent's characters. Now, the last time I talked about the green starter deck, I made a comparison to Flower Cannon. However, it was pointed out in the comments that maybe I was a little overzealous in my analysis of that because Flower Cannon's main strength was that it could stall your opponent if it came out of security, or the equivalent of life in the Digimon game. And this does not have nearly that strong of an ability. So the trigger ability, if it comes out of life, play 1 of your Supernovas type cards with a cost of 2 or less from your hand. So yeah, you could put beige onto the battlefield, and then it gives you an additional blocker, which kind of stalls a little bit, but it's no Flower Cannon for sure. That said, it is still a very good card, especially if you get it in hand, and especially if you have to deal with some really problematic characters, right? So I do think that Straw Sword is still a very good utility event card. But there you have it. That's my version of the upgraded Green Kid starter deck. Let me know in the comments down below what you think about it. How do you feel about the ratios? Do you think I should have, increased one more than the other? Do you like Repel? I want to know why. Let me know. And if you found this video helpful, please consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel. And if you want to go even further beyond, consider joining the membership and hitting the join button down below. I'm pretty excited to roll out some really cool things for our membership program and to just interact with the community a little bit more. But if you want to see this deck in action, go check out this live stream over here where I played with this deck as well as some of the other decks that I created to try and get some practice in before the deck limited battles. I think that'll do it for me, so captains, remember, build what you like, play what you love, and I'll catch you in the next video.